I have been fascinated by all of the courtroom developments going on in Fulton County, Georgia. That's where Democrats thought they were going to convict Donald Trump for trying to overthrow the election in 2020. But instead, what do they say on The Office? How the turntables have turned as things have changed down there. Fani Willis now being scrutinized for her corruption, taking cash from the taxpayers, sleeping with her coworkers, hiring the people that she's been sleeping with. It's all a big disaster, and it just keeps getting worse for her. Ed Morrissey joins us now. He's a managing editor over at Hot Air and the host of the Ed Morrissey Show podcast as well. Sir, always nice to talk to you.
Oh, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it is. I mean, it has been such great courtroom drama. I've enjoyed watching all of it. And during this, you've had some primary characters. You've got Fani Willis, of course, the Attorney General in Fulton County. You've got Nathan Wade, who is the attorney who's never prosecuted a felony in his life that she hired to do that very job against Donald Trump. And it turns out it's very likely she was sleeping with him for a long time. And you've also got Terrence Bradley. This is the former law partner of Nathan Wade, who for a time, according to some text messages, was willing to tell all sorts of people that Nathan Wade was engaged in a long-term relationship with Fani Willis. But then on the stand, he suddenly had a pretty convenient case of amnesia. What's going on now, Ed?
Well, what's going on right now is that that case of amnesia has prompted at least two people to come forward to say, no. Terrence Bradley was telling me about these relationships. At the same time, he was texting Ashley Merchant about it. He wasn't at all unclear about the nature of the relationship. One of those, though, is, I think, a little bit more important. And let me just preface it by saying this. Technically speaking, what these witnesses are attesting to would be hearsay, but they're not actually attesting to the affair itself. They're attesting to what Terrence Bradley shared with him about his own personal knowledge of it as a rebuttal to his claim that he didn't have any personal knowledge. And that's the reason why this would probably be allowed as testimony in the hearing. But the one of the witnesses, her name is Cindi Lee Yeager. She is actually a current deputy DA in Cobb County, which is right nearby Fulton County. And she not only is going to testify to that, but she's also going to testify that she was actually in the room when Terrence Bradley was talking to Fani Willis and heard Fani Willis tell Terrence Bradley not to talk to investigators about their relationship, which is witness tampering. And that's a very, very bad idea. You're a prosecutor, and you're trying to prosecute a corruption case. It looks very, very dodgy.
So these witnesses were coming forward. To your point, they're basically saying that Terrence Bradley perjured himself on the stand. They heard him say one thing, and he said something completely different on the stand. That seems like pretty relevant testimony.
It does seem like very relevant testimony to me. And what I would say is that again, this is just about a disqualification motion, right? I mean, the whole thing is just about a disqualification motion. And now you have three attorneys in Fulton County that are likely going to have to face some disciplinary action if they're lucky. They may not be facing criminal charges for perjury, but they're definitely going to be facing disciplinary action from the state bar over filing false claims in court. I mean, they're officers of the court. They're not allowed to do that. And it's one thing if your client lies to you and you file something that your client said, but you didn't realize it was false. They're talking about their own testimony about themselves, and they know it's false. And they made representations to the court which were knowingly false, and that is a supreme no-no for attorneys. It's a disbarring no-no for attorneys. And so there's all sorts of fallout that's going to happen from this.
In the text messages that came out last week between Terrence Bradley and Ashley Merchant, he seemed very willing to help her in her disqualification case against Fani Willis for a time. He was texting all sorts of detailed information. Yeah, the relationship was going on for this long. It was happening well before Nathan Wade was ever hired by Fani Willis. He was ready to share everything. And then all of a sudden, in this trial, he's, as I mentioned, he seems to have forgotten everything. At least that's how he represented it. He's like, I'm not sure. I don't remember. I can't recall, is kind of what they famously say. But at one point, at one point during the hearing, an issue was brought up. Were you threatened? Were you threatened? And he kind of disputed the idea that he was. But Ed Morrissey, do you suspect that Terrence Bradley was threatened in some way to compel his testimony here?
I'm not even sure if it was directly, but you have to remember that the context of this was he was fighting a claim of sexual assault at the law firm that he and Nathan Wade were partners at. And he ended up leaving rather than dealing with that situation. I don't know if it ever got resolved to anybody's satisfaction. And so that's kind of still hanging over the guy's head. Now, he claims he's innocent. It came up during the hearing. I think it was Ashley Merchant that brought it out to sort of defuse the issue because she knew that, Fulton County's attorneys were going to rip into him and say, well, you're just doing this, to get even, which is a possibility, right? But, yeah, I mean, that's certainly a pressure point. That could have been a pressure point. I don't know if it was, but It could have been a pressure point. But when you combine up with Cindi Lee Yeager as a testing that she will testify to, it certainly adds up to witness intimidation. And I think that's exactly what happened. And that's exactly why Terrence Bradley delivered that very bizarre performance. Was that last? I think it was last week when he was testifying, or it may have been.
It all runs together. Yeah,
no, really does.
No,
yeah.
But it has. But it actually, though, I was about to ask about the timing of this. It does feel like it's been stretching on for far too long, though. At least for me, as an armchair non-lawyer watching all of this, I'm going, they're lying. They're so obviously lying. I'm yelling at my television screen, and I'm thinking, how long does it take to disqualify her and the rest of her team from this case? It hasn't happened yet, Ed Morrissey. Will we see it soon?
I don't know. He said that he'll have a ruling within 2 weeks, right? But the problem is now that he may have to reopen the evidentiary phase of this because he may need to take this testimony. Or it might be that Judge Scott McAfee has heard enough. You know who Dave Wasserman is, right?
Yes, from the Cook Political Report.
Cook Political Report. What's his tagline whenever he's tweeting and he's about ready to call a race? What does he say?
He says, "I've seen enough."
I've seen enough. I think maybe Judge Scott McAfee is at the point of I've seen enough.
I would hope so.
I just need to write this.
I would hope so. So everyone's kind of been hoping if you watch the hearings, and as you have, Ed, you look and you say, okay, Judge McAfee seems like he's handling this in the kind of dispassionate, sober way you'd expect a judge to treat a case like this. But there's still, of course, sort of the lingering concerns, right? Because nowadays you're suspicious of everybody in politics, and some people have been suspicious their entire lives. But like a guy like McAfee, so McAfee at one point he worked for Fani Willis. And both of them were in a much more junior capacity, but he worked for her at one point. And he did make a donation to her campaign at one point. And you sit there and you wonder, is this guy on the up and up? Is he under either current or just personal political pressure to rule in her favor?
Well, I think first off, I think they worked together, and he worked for her briefly. I don't think it was for very long, if I recall.
Right.
And apparently they were on friendly terms, right? Friendly enough to where he kicked in $150 to her campaign. Now, I don't really consider that a massive donation, but it's not $5 either. But I don't think that that's an indication that he's going to be biased on Willis's behalf, especially given the nonsense that unfolded in his court.
Yes.
I do think it might explain, though, why he was so what's the right word, indulgent with her when she was on the stand and allowed her to act up. And at a certain point, he finally had enough and made it clear that if she continued to act up, he was going to strike all of her testimony from the record, which actually might have done her a favor in the end. But she did. She settled down after that, and she comported herself somewhat better. But the thing is that when you've got judges like this in counties like any county, Fulton County, doesn't really matter. All these attorneys kind of come up together, right? So they all kind of know each other. It's a community of attorneys that work in courts like this. So you're never going to find 3 attorneys in that or 4 attorneys in that scenario that don't have any connection whatsoever to each other. They're all going to have had some interactions with each other. All of these are people who are active in the legal/political scene. I don't really consider that to be an issue. I think Scott McAfee's just trying to make sure that he's being seen to be bending over backwards to allow Willis to have her say in this, and then he'll lower the boom when it comes. Because there's no way, after watching all this unfold, that anybody's going to have confidence that Fani Willis is actually able to move forward on this. There's no concept in my mind how a judge can look at this and say, oh, no, everything's fine.
So make a prediction for us. What happens here? Does Fulton County lose this case or lose control of this case, and Fani Willis is taken off of it?
I think most judges will do the minimum necessary, right? They don't really want to go over that. Some are more activists, but most judges are cautious. So I think what McAfee says is he rules that I'm not going to get into who started what when. It's very clear, though, that based on the testimony and the things that I've seen in the courtroom, that there is more than an ample appearance of impropriety going on here, and that's enough to remove Fulton County DA's office from this case. He's not going to dismiss the case. He's not going to dismiss it even without prejudice. I think he just removes Fulton County DA, refers it back. There's a prosecutor's council, I believe, in Georgia that operates in conjunction with the state bar, and he'll throw it to them and try to get it assigned to a different jurisdiction. But at that point, a different jurisdiction is going to look at this and go, this case is a loser. I mean, there are individual crimes in here that you can prosecute, but the RICO part of this is nonsense. And I think it falls apart at that point.
Yeah, it definitely does. Although, Georgia, Fulton County is not the only blue county in Georgia. You mentioned Cobb County. There are some other places that might have prosecutors who have an appetite for this. But boy, this is a very hot case, and the kind of thing that doesn't have any sort of legal precedent to it whatsoever.
I've never seen anything like this. And I'm not an expert on this either, but I've never seen anything like this. But then again, the RICO case, nobody's really ever seen a RICO case like this either, where there wasn't a financial benefit at the core of it. The RICO cases are usually the RICO predicate is used to deal with massive amounts of financial benefits that are being manipulated illegally. For other purposes as well, organized crime. So there's all sorts of different things, but there's a financial benefit at the center of it. There's no financial benefit, and there's no organization, right? This was sort of an ad hoc collection of people that were challenging an election for a period of time that lasted 2-3 months. That's not an organization. So it's a really unusual case, and again, I think that if this lands in almost any other jurisdiction, they look at this and go, no, this is not going to fly. I can't make this work.
All right, we'll see what happens. Ed Morrissey, thank you as always for your insights and your excellent work over at Hot Air, sir. Nice to talk to you today.